2001's Band of Brothers and the absolutely classic Saving Private Ryan went on to inspire a lot of games, not least Company of Heroes, which launched in 2006 and was developed by Relic Entertainment. This time around, Feral Interactive bring the Nintendo Switch version of the complete package. This includes the base game, both of the expansions, Opposing Fronts and Tales of Valor, and supposedly a lot of work on the control scheme, which I'm going to tell you all about. On Switch though, anything's possible. Is this one a Tale of Valor or a Company of Zeros? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to Switch Up. Now, let's find out. What differentiated Company of Heroes from a lot of its strategic predecessors was that it managed to tell a coherent story through its in-engine cutscenes. It took place during the Second World War and followed two different factions from the US military during the Battle of Normandy, Operation Overlord, and the liberation of France, known as Operation Cobra. Between missions, story scenes play out, and look, they don't look exactly incredible these days, and there are a few performance issues there which we'll talk about, but if there's one thing that many war games have been guilty of in the past, it was not adding a human element to any of the proceedings. Company of Heroes did the exact opposite, humanising events and making us care, for better and sometimes worse, for the individual units under our control as well as the enemies we faced.
Just wasting ammo. The war's not over.
Each stage in Company of Heroes is an operation from the war. A map in the corner shows you all of the available objectives and capture points, and you're given control of your units. Whereas historically I've played this with a mouse and keyboard, I was interested to see how the controls would carry over, and I'm quite impressed. On the Switch, you can hold R, which will bring up a radial menu, and you can assign groups to any of the slots that are available. Clicking these will obviously select the group, but if you double press, then it will take you straight to them. Another very nice feature is that you can assign orders during the pause screen. For missions like the defense of Carentan, that was almost essential, as even with the optimizations to controls, you're certainly pushed for time there. The ability menu has also been tweaked. You hold ZR and it brings up another wheel, and through a combination of the D-pad to select or L to move to the upgrade screen, once you've got to grips with it, it's actually really seamless. Another pet peeve of mine when I haven't got a mouse and keyboard is panning the camera over the terrain. They've built a speed up option here, so you can hold the ZR trigger and it massively increases that panning speed. You can also tweak that in the options and change all of the sensitivities. What you can't do is use touchscreen for the actual battles. There are some touchscreen elements during some of the menus, and I think it's a bit strange seeing as the game is out on iOS. They could have just carried that straight over. I have played a lot of strategy games on the Switch, and these controls are certainly some of the best I've seen. Selecting your units, moving them around to the next objective, and capturing points are actions you have to carry out time and time again. Then there are also a few extra options, like being able to slow down time when you're using a special move, which are very handy and nice little touches. Now the gameplay itself, well, it varies from stage to stage, but as I said, you generally control a unit, capture different points around the map, and carry out a series of main and side objectives. They may be things like holding out on a road, defeating any armoured vehicles, or setting up an ambush. When you're hovering over an area to move your units to, it will show you the level of cover indicated by the colour of the small shield, green obviously being the most effective. Paratroopers can also build. They can lay sandbags, mines on the ground, and actually create structures at the capture points, things like lookout outposts. And later in the game you'll have forward operating bases from which you can actually build troops, like the old school Command & Conquer, with there being an intentional population limit to the number you can have, making selection choices much more important. Scenarios do have some script into them. You'll be given some tasks that you will not be able to complete, as it's reflecting what happened historically, but there are also a lot of times where you've got some freedom in how you approach the objective. Do you send your units as fast as they can headlong into two MG42s, or do you pummel them with mortars from a distance, or even use satchel charges to blow up a wall in the east of the village to get round the back? Company of Heroes has a suppression system. It means that if you're in cover and the enemy approaches, suppressing fire will cause them to slow down and essentially pin them to the spot. Aside from your special abilities, you can throw grenades and satchel charges, and you'll need these to clear out buildings, which can also be occupied. There are some advanced troops like snipers who can cloak themselves and creep around the battlefield to spot out further enemy emplacements. And then in your own command menu, as you earn points from defeating enemies and capturing objectives, you can unlock special actions like a howitzer blast, another all-important element for turning the tide of battle. It's quite funny playing Company of Heroes this far after launch and experiencing just how well it's aged and how well it stands up compared to hundreds of different strategy games since it came out. If you're a fan of the genre, you're going to absolutely love it. It's a great game, and it's especially nice for me because I didn't play the original expansions, so playing through Opposing Fronts and Tales of Valor, which in total add 5 new campaigns, it's happy gaming, as Glenn would say. Now, gameplay for me scores 19 out of 20. Controls, they could be slightly better by having those touchscreen options. For all of the gameplay, I give those 16 out of 20. Visually, we're looking at 30 frames per second in both docked and handheld mode, and 1080p in docked and 720p when you're playing in handheld, so native resolution. While we don't see any improvements in the visual quality, it does look nice on Switch. You can see the amount of work they've put into the custom UIs, the controls make sense. What I will say though is that frame rates, although the publisher has said to us it runs at 30 all the time, in the cutscenes it certainly doesn't, and actually they need to work on that. I can't remember if this was in the original game and the cutscenes always ran at 20, but they feel really chuggy at times. Now, the important part obviously is the gameplay, and that is absolutely flawless. I haven't had any crashes, and it's a testament to the original release just how good it still looks. What we don't have here is multiplayer mode by the looks, but surprisingly they are actually planning on adding that in a post-release patch. Perhaps there's something they need to work on there, or just see how the launch goes. But I would actually like multiplayer. I love multiplayer strategy games, and why I haven't had the original Command & Conquer released, for me that would just be an instant win. Company of Heroes has a wonderful soundscape, from the rumbling treads of tanks to the screams of soldiers trapped under suppressing fire. It's a cliche, but it sounds incredibly authentic, and once again gives that human element to something that's so often glorified.
We're being hit by crowd infantry! We got him! Keep it up, airborne! I'm going. You won't see this coming.
Visuals and performance, they score 16 out of 20. Sound and audio is an easy 18 out of 20. This release is going to set you back £19.99 or your regional equivalents, and it is a digital only release, including all of the expansions that we had for the base game. As far as completion times, well, the base campaign will take around 20 to 25 hours, but that's not seeing hardly any of the extra content. You could easily spend up to 80 hours if you want to find and see absolutely everything and obviously complete those other campaigns. I do hope they stick with their plans to release all the additional content, and this would be the perfect candidate for a physical release. For 20 quid, it's a heck of a lot of content. I give value 18 out of 20. So in conclusion then, Sega and Feral bringing Company of Heroes the Complete Edition to the Switch was a good idea. They do need to add in the multiplayer, and performance during cutscenes, it's not great, but everywhere else the work they've put in is evident, with particular credit having to go to those controls that are really cleverly designed. It gets a Switch Up score of 87%. Is this one you'll be adding to your collection? I love me some strategy games, and this is one of the best of all time, with sensible controls, so yeah, happy days. Let me know in the comments, and as always, if you want to save yourself 10%, use code SWITCHUP over at switchup.gg, and we get a little kickback from Nintendo. Thanks to our Patreons, our members, all of you that enjoy the content, and as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!